What's up, guys? Welcome back to Saws and Scraps. Today is my birthday, and I cannot think of a better way to spend it than with my camera crew, which is my lovely wife Connie, and doing something that I absolutely love doing, which is building. Today I'm going to show you a cheap way, less than $50, to put a rustic coffee table. It's going to be something similar to this right here, if my wife can pan down. This is actually something that I built for my wife while she was gone. It's not going to be as fancy. She's going to be 4x4 legs. This is something I built for her while she was out of town, and she came back. Surprise, surprise. It's going to be a little different. It's going to have individual slat top, kind of like a farm table. But so I don't have anything cut yet. So we're going to go outside and we're going to cut everything, and it's not going to be that hard at all. All right, let's get started. It was too pretty of a day not to spend it outside cutting, so we're going to do most of the cutting outside. I forgot to go over some of the tools we're going to be using for this. What I'm going to be using, obviously, is this massive contraption here. They've got them smaller. You can use a miter box. You don't have to use this. I just have it and it's easier for me. I maybe will use a skill saw, a pocket jig, 18 volt cordless drill, and a couple of small tools like a speed square, pencil, tape measure, stuff like that. That's really all you're going to need for this, and the supplies. So with this one, we're not going to use any sealer or varnish or anything like that. The customer I'm building this one for was very specific about wanting this to look extremely rustic, so we're not going to be sealing it. We will be staining it, and then we're going to rough it up pretty good to give it that nice rustic look. Let some of that wood texture bleed through the stain. But he had very specific dimensions. The height of the table is going to be, he wants it to be 12 inches. So my tabletop is about a ½ inch thick. So I'm going to cut my legs down to 11.5 inches. And we're going to do that now. Make sure you're always wearing a pair of safety glasses when doing any type of cutting. I've got sunglasses on because it's bright out here, but safety goggles, glasses, anything you got that'll protect your eyes because there's wood flying everywhere. Make sure when you're cutting your wood, if you're using one of these types of saws, make sure your wood is all the way up against your fence. That way you get a nice square cut. Alright guys, we're back inside. So one thing I like to do when I'm building these tables before I cut the aprons, which is your frame pieces, the pieces that run underneath the table for the stability. One thing I like to do, especially with a custom built table where it's specific dimensions, the customer is really specific about the size he wants, is I like to cut all the tabletop first, and then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to get laid out, and that way I can see specifically how long I got to cut my aprons. So I like, on the ends, I like about a 3.5 inch overhang on my ends here, and I like about a 1.5 inch on my edges. So I'm going to get everything laid out about like that. I'm going to take some measurements, get it all squared, and then I'm going to measure for my aprons. And one thing you definitely want to do too, when you cut all these legs, even though you measured and you think you cut everything the same, it's best to put them all together side by side, make sure they're all the same height, because if you have one that's even as small as 1/8 of an inch off, your table's going to rock, and that's obviously the last thing you ever want, is to have a rock in your table where you got to shim it up on one side. It just doesn't look good. Alright, so that's exactly where I want my legs. So now all I'm going to do for my aprons is I'm just going to measure in between this way, and then I'm going to go cut my aprons. And write it down. Alright guys, so we got our aprons cut. And now what we're going to do before we assemble them is we're going to use a pocket jig to, pretty much what that does is drill an angle, and it makes it to where you don't have to drill straight into something when you're screwing things from an angle. You're able to get a tighter fasten on it. I'm going to show you just what I do, just what I use to do that. Here's a pocket jig, got it from Harbor Freight. It's about $20. The one from Home Depot and Lowe's, the actual Kreg Jig Company, theirs is about $100. The reason I ended up getting this one from Harbor Freight, I don't do furniture every day. It was just easier. It seemed more logical to get one that was $20 opposed to $100. So with this thing right here, last time I was using it, I was actually drilling holes for a 2x6. This thing's set up to do, it fits perfectly with a 2x4. If you you see a 2x4, which is actually 3.5 inches wide, it you know, my cat's got our attention. Sorry about that. He likes to try to steal the show. Anyways, this thing's set up for a 2x4, which is 3.5 inches wide.
We can't do this, buddy.
So, this thing's set up for to hold 2x4s. It's 3.5 inches wide, which is exactly what a 2x4 is. So when you set it on here like this, it's perfectly flush. It's got this lever here that you can take it and you can pin the 2x4 down. Now it's not going anywhere. And it's got, mine has two different sets of holes here. It's got, if you want to drill more than an upright angle, if you're doing 1-bys instead of 2-bys, and what I mean by that is a 1-by, which is only half the width of this, you have to go a little bit more at an angle, because if you don't, you'll end up bleeding the screw through the side here, and you don't want that. The ones that are set a little more at an angle on a tilt, they're for your 2x4s, which is really the only ones I like to use. A lot of people will build these coffee tables doing 1x4s for their aprons. I don't like to do it out of building a few out of both. I found that doing it out of 2x4s works a whole lot better, because I feel like I get a lot tighter grab on my wood than with a 1-by. So anytime I'm building tables, I like to do the aprons out of 2x4s. So last time I was using this, I was using it to do pocket holes for a 2x6. And obviously that's going to be way too wide where my holes are for a 2x4, because the holes are going to end up being out here. So you got this little screw knob here that what you can do is adjust it. I've got little tick marks and measurements right here. I like to slide them in to center on about 1 inch on both sides. Is where I found I like it best for doing pocket holes for a 2x4. And I'm going to come up right here, make it flushed on both sides. I'm going to drop my lever on it, and then I'm going to take this bit, and this bit comes with the Kreg jig and with this one I got from Harbor Freight. This will come, the bit will come with the Kreg jig and with the one I've got. You just literally drop it down in here. It's got a nice little track guide right there, and you just make sure you start drilling before you press the bit up against the wood. You're going to go to the other side and do the same thing. And try not to hammer it down, just let the bit do the work. Set my drill down. I'm going to release it. And then you see here, sometimes you got to clean it up just a bit, which is fine. This is all going to be hidden. But you see these little angles right here that it makes, so that you can take your screw and shoot it in an angle, and it's going to come out of the face of the 2x4 right here. Grab your 4x4 post that we're using for our legs, and it's going to be a whole tighter finish than having a bunch of screws exposed, where you can see a bunch of screws where you put this thing together. So literally, I'm going to keep my pocket holes up top on the same side. I'm just going to flip it straight over, and I'm going to do the same thing. And we're going to do that for every one of our aprons. Alright guys, so I've got it laid out generally where I want it. We're doing it upside down. It's just easier for me to do it that way. Some people will do it different. They'll build the frame and then flip it over, put the top on. That's the way I like to do it. So I get it laid out where I want my pocket holes to be. They're all going to be facing to the inside, so when the table's sitting upright, you can't see any holes from the outside. So I get it in place, kind of look at where I want it, and then I take it, flip it up on its side, get it flush with the top, get it flush with the inside. And you see I'm using this really long bit right here. I'm just using a deck screw. It's called a bugle head or a star head. I like it better than Phillips head, better than square head. It tends not to strip as easily. You want to get a long bit like this, because when you're drilling down this pocket hole, you don't have a long bit to keep going down there. You can lose the contact between your head and the screw, and then you won't be able to get it out or adjust it or sink it deeper if you want to. So that's why I like to use a long bit like this. So just drop my screw in there. Make sure you got a good tight hold on your apron. Make sure it's flush. The other side. Alright. Flip it back so it goes like that. Turn it up, we're going to do the exact same thing. Of course, it's always good if you have an extra hand doing this. I've done it a few times on my own, so it's not as bad, but it's a lot easier if you got somebody to hold it for you. Alright guys, so that's the frame. A lot of times with these tables, what you could do, and what I normally would do, is the way we did the pocket holes. Marco, shut up! Go on. I'm filming here. So anyways, like I was saying, a lot of times what I would normally do with the tabletop, so you wouldn't see screws exposed from above, so I'm not drilling down into the top, into the frame, is I would do pocket holes on this right here, on these side aprons and these short aprons, coming up at an angle like this, so that you could screw through the pocket hole up through this right here, and it would be secure and you wouldn't see anything from the top. And since this is going to be a rustic look, I'm going to screw right down through the top. We're going to wood putty it, and then when I stain over it, sand it, you'll never see it. So, alright, so before you start putting your top on, one thing you definitely want to do is you want to make sure that your frame is square, and the easiest way to do that is to take your tape measure, pull from one corner to the other. So here I've got 37 and 7/8, and I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other corner. 37 and 3/4, that's pretty close. Do your adjusting as you need to. That's perfect. So now you don't want to try to beat and bang on the frame too much before you get everything secure. So you just start laying your boards up here. Before you get everything perfectly straight, you just want to get it somewhat close with your overhang. And then we're going to run a tape all the way around it to make sure our overhangs are consistent all the way around. I think I've got it pretty close. Remember we said we were going to do a 3.5 inch overhang on this side and then 1.5 inches on this side. Alright, now that I've got it pretty close, I've got my 3.5 inches all the way around on the 4 corners and my 1.5 inches on the edges. I'm going to take something straight. I like to use a 4-foot level. You can use a board that's relatively straight. And then you just push until you're flush up against your level. That way you know you've got everything nice and straight. If one side's not as good as the other, that's fine. You can always pop a line and shave off the end. But when you get one side good and perfect, that way you know you've got it good all the way around. That right there looks good. I'll double check one more time. 3.5. 3.5 and 1.5 inches. So we know we're good. One thing I like to do is I like to drill pilot holes because I don't want to take a chance at splitting this wood. This premium pine stuff's a little drier than stuff like treated and some of your exterior wood, so I like to pre-drill holes. That way I know I'm not going to split my wood. First you got to find out where your slat is. So if you take a measurement underneath right here, I've got 5.5 inches, so I know if I come in about 5 3/4, I'm going to hit the center of my slat. When you're doing that, try not to pull on your boards. Just make some pencil marks where I'm going to drill my pilot holes. Make sure you don't come too far out with your pilot hole on this side because remember, we've got 1.5 inch overhang. So make sure you put your hand out on the board because you don't want them running. And drill your pilot holes. And another thing, when you're drilling pilot holes, make sure, always double check and make sure your bit that you're drilling pilot holes with is a little bit skinnier than the screw you're using. You definitely want it to be skinnier, that way you get a better grab with your screw. If you do something that's the same size or a little bit bigger, your screw's not going to grab nearly as good with whatever you're trying to screw down. You want to countersink it just a little bit, same as if you would do in sheetrock, maybe just a little bit less than an 1/8 inch, maybe an 1/8 inch. You want to countersink it because we're going to come back and wood putty over the top of it. If it's flush with the top, the wood putty won't sink in. So we've got all the planks screwed down. Last thing we want to do is we're going to wood putty these holes, wait about 30 minutes, and then we're going to go outside and sand it. This is what I use, little Elmer's wood filler, picked it up from Lowe's. It's very cheap, very simple stuff. It's easy to work with, washes off with water. So make sure your table is free of debris, sawdust, blow everything off, wipe everything down. I've got a regular spackling knife here. I'm just going to grab some. I'm going to go over each hole pass just like this. Make sure I smear it in there, come across, just run it in again, clean it up. You don't have to worry if it's messy. Once we sand it, it'll clean everything right up. Make sure you're really pressing down in that hole, working the putty down inside the hole where we countersunk our screw. Alright, so we just got back in from sanding it. Looks real good. Now we're going to go ahead and stain it. What I normally use and what the customer specified is he wanted a darker color stain. So what I use is Kona. It's Rust-Oleum, I think. Yeah, I think it's an oil base, so it usually gives you directions on how to remove it. In this case, I always make sure I have some mineral spirits because you're not getting this stuff off with soap and water. Make sure when you're going to apply it, you always go with the grain. Don't ever go against the grain. And it's, for those of you who don't know, it's easy to see the grain. Don't shake your stain when, if you've already used it once and you're gonna take it back out. Don't shake it. Just make sure when you open it, you stir it instead. You can do it with a stir stick. I normally just do it with a screwdriver. So this stuff goes a long ways, so you don't have to saturate your brush in it. Like I said, when you come off, just nice, smooth, even strokes with the grain. This stuff spreads pretty good. I always like to do my top first because it's the least amount of square footage up top. Sometimes if I'm in a hurry and I want to try to get both sides done real quick, I'll take a blow dryer and I'll go ahead and just kind of do this side. That way I can turn it over and start working on the bottom. Alright guys, so this is the last part of what we're going to do with the coffee table. I've got 120 grit sandpaper here, just a little handle that houses the sandpaper. You can do it with an orbital electric sander. I like to do it by hand because I can control the consistency of how much I'm going to sand it. Okay, so just as when you were staining it, make sure when you're sanding it, you go with the grain and not against it. It'll be a lot smoother and the texture will be a lot better. So all we're going to do is just take nice, even, smooth strokes and just rough it up. Zoom in, you can see the difference of what it does right here, where I've roughed it up and where we first stained it, the way it lets that wood look bleed through. Essentially what it would look like if I put a varnish on it. Isn't that crazy the way that just boldly bleeds through like that? Okay guys, so that's it. It's done. As you can see from the video, really simple to construct these. We've got $35, maybe $40 tied up in this, not much at all. You can do this yourself at home if you don't obviously want to go out and spend, anywhere from 70 to 100 bucks for one of these. You can literally do it at home yourself as long as you got the right tools and this video. After we got done sanding it, I meant to say I did take a wet rag and wipe it down. I'd wipe it down 2 times. Don't get too heavy with the water on your rag. Squeak it out real good, wipe it down, get the loose stain off of it, and then wait for it to dry and do it again. It takes all about 10 minutes to do that. I hope you liked the video. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the page. Check out the website listed on the page. And thanks a lot for stopping by, guys.